Coming up towards 6:19 in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, let's continue in the vein because it is very much the flavor of the week, as I said. This Judith Jones Committee report entitled Safeguarding Children in Community Residences and Child Support Centers in Trinidad and Tobago. Minister of Gender and Child Affairs, Ayanna Webster-Roy, announced a task force and a $126 million action plan. I'm excited already. This follows allegations of abuse and misconduct at children's homes revealed in the report handed to Cabinet in December of last year. The 11-person investigative team visited some 21 institutions and conducted 46 interviews, which revealed instances of sexual and physical abuse at some children's homes. Also coming to light is the role and function of the Children's Authority. Minister Webster-Roy in today's newspaper is quoted as saying, "It would not be fair to say the Children's Authority did nothing to intervene when it was made aware of reports of abuse at children's homes." Well, we have the man himself, the former chairman of the Children's Authority, Hanif Benjamin, of course, is a clinical traumatologist, and we'll discuss quite a bit more of that in a moment. He's now in his private capacity. He's no longer chairman of the Children's Authority. But Mr. Benjamin, you were with us live. You're with us live for this hour again this morning. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Fazir, for having me. As always, it's a pleasure. And being here in person, as the young people say, in real life.
In real life. In real, as we grew up saying. But we may be smiling. But let me ask you the obvious question. Hanif Benjamin, what did you and the authority do in your time in office, given what has come out from this report?
Well, I think it's a fair question, being the immediate former chairman of the Children's Authority from 2017 to 2020. I think it is important for us to understand in the first instance that the issues that plague the nation in this report is not new. I have seen and studied many reports before, for many years, that dealt with child abuse in the system, that dealt with institutions and the lack of candor, the lack of will to do what is necessary. And so when I got into the Children's Authority as the chairman, this issue confronted us head on. For the first time, we have an agency that was charged solely with the responsibility for care and protection and licensing and monitoring of all children's homes. So what it did is encapsulate a system around child protection, which is beautiful. It is the international model. And so in that model, as I want to start by saying, the authority is a creature of legislation, meaning it was born out of a number of legislation in Parliament. So immediately, you have to consider your legislative role in the protection of children, you see. And so when I listened and I read and studied the report and the recommendations that is coming out of the report and the surprise of a lot of surprises around it, I am confused as to why we are surprised, really. Because most of the instances that was put forward, and about 90% of the recommendations, I would have as chairman and the board would have begun, put in place, or left there. So the question for me today is, why are we still talking about those recommendations? I wanted to hear how far along those recommendations went. And all the way from the minister, all the way down to the man on the street, we have been pushing these recommendations, or at least trying to. So
could I ask the question, why haven't those recommendations been pushed forward during your time in office?
Well, we pushed forward as much as we could have in the 3 years. You see, and I think that is important for people to know, because the question that is coming to me now is, as the former chair, did you know? And if you did, what did you do? And we did a lot. We did a lot. And I wanted to start with the first and what I consider the largest recommendation, in my view, in this report, which is the legislative restructuring of the organization. For say, very early in the game, I was, everybody keeps saying, we need more staff, we need more staff, we need more staff. And I wasn't convinced. I wasn't convinced that we needed more staff as opposed to we needed the right staff. I believe that this Children's Authority is a social service agency. It wasn't structured like that. It was a technocrat type of setup, which was, in my view, flawed from the beginning. And so you had to now pivot the organization to a social service agency. But yet, most of the people who are working there did not possess, and still today is not having their position, social service acumens. You see, that is the first challenge.
Square pegs and wrong holes, you're saying?
Well, you say it like that. I wanna say it in, I wanna say the acumen, the skill set. That was a major concern for me. And so the first thing we did was an audit, a full HR audit, to determine whether we needed more staff or we needed the right staff. That audit was conducted and the recommendation began. And we saw exactly what you just said. And so people were put on plans to either upskill, to get the proper qualification, or to move out. Simple.
How would you respond immediately, Hanif Benjamin, to the assertion? You know why Hanif Benjamin come this morning? To pass off blame on everybody else and don't take responsibility. How would you respond to that?
You see, I am one who have always, in every dealing of my life, say it as it is. Number one, take responsibility where responsibility need to be taken and look to the future in terms of how we can do better. That has been me all along, and much to the detriment, because a lot of people can't take that. Because you see, I have no friends or favors. It is what it is. And that is why I had so much challenges pushing a lot of things. Because you call people out and you hold them accountable. And I have recognized in this country, from pillar to post, people do not like to be held accountable. And from the time you start to hold people accountable, you are now a bad guy. And I had none of it. And so it was me pushing the board to take action. Sometimes, for my own disappointment, the board moved too slow. And they would know that because I would always be saying, let me tell you something. I said, for the banking industry, Fazir, money is their risk. For the food industry, food and quality is their risk. For the child industry, saving lives and protecting childhood is our risk. We can't wait. And so this, you had to turn and twist. I wasn't having that for zero. Because when we lapse, a child dies. When we lapse, youth is snuffed. And we had to recognize that. And so a big part of this was the risk. And I made it very clear that we will hold people accountable. When we didn't do well, we will say we didn't do well. We would analyze and we will do it better. As opposed to excuses. And that is all you get in excuses. Why didn't that? And you need more resources. And I'm saying, this is not a resource issue. We like to throw that resource issue. While resource is important, having the right person to do the job, for example. As a social worker, you are trained differently than a psychologist. A psychologist is important and has their role and function. So too is a social worker. When you take a psychologist, a criminologist, a human service professional to do an assessment, for example, in the community, they might take 2 weeks to do an assessment, while a social worker who is properly trained will take 2 days. So when you hear that there is a backlog in cases in the thousands, you have to ask yourself, why is that? Is it because you need more resources? Or is it because you have the wrong people doing the work that's supposed to be done? So while there is a person hardworking, they're tired, and I'm not knocking that at all, but the skill set is not there. And that is why one of the first things I said, we have to get social workers in here. And social workers was like a bad word in the authority.
Why?
But this is what I had to find out. I remember for zero, and people gonna come at me, and I'm prepared because my shoulder broad for a reason, and I thank God for bringing the shoulders broad. I had to call a special board meeting for zero to change a position in the child support center or the reception center that everybody talking about, from anybody to a social worker, because I believed that if you have a social worker who is properly trained, that place will do well. All that abuse, all those children running away will not happen. Because as a social worker, you see differently. But that was a fight. And I'm saying that even people on the board fought me on having a social worker as the job description, you want social worker, psychologist.
But I still try to understand why. What is the fight down about? That they have a thing against social workers?
Well, I don't know, Fazir. I don't know. But for me, I was relentless because I believe that this is a social service agency. When I did the forensic audit or asked the forensic audit to be had for that place, because the amount of reports I was getting, I would go to my office in Tunapuna, my private office, and I would find envelopes under the door with people complaining, staff complaining. I would go to the grocery and people would see me and people would call me on block numbers to complain. So you realize how bad it was. And when I was fed up, I said, listen, we need to do auditing it. And when I asked to see the qualification, in all of the staff at the time, there were only 3 people with a social work degree. Everybody else was criminal psychology, no degree, all kind of madness. And so we had to now the disappointing thing is, while the board was able to secure the change, we left that agency, well, at least this board left that agency with that position not being filled for all kind of reasons. All kind of reasons. And unfortunately, it is my information, I don't know, I could be wrong, that when that board left, there was no board for a period. And that position was rescinded.
You mean the position of social work?
Social work,
right.
yes, it was rescinded to social work psychology. And a lot of time you're hearing, we can't find social workers. In a country where you have 4 universities churning out social workers by the hundreds, we can't find social workers. So the first thing in my mind was fixing the agency to understand its role and function, and the people to carry out the role and function. And that is why we did that audit, which led to, including, there was a position called Deputy Director of Care, Legal and Regulatory. That one person was carrying 80% of the organization. That is madness. Because if one person is carrying 80% of the organization, no wonder there was backlog. No wonder things could not flow through as quickly. And you remember I told you, with child, immediacy is important. So we split that. So we now have a Deputy Director of Care and a Deputy Director of Legal and Regulatory Services. So we could get better flow and better management of the system. What came out of that is the model. As a matter of fact, the authority had no model. It had no model. In the 21st century, we create an agency without a model because we wasn't thinking that this is a social service agency. And so for you, we went on a hunt to find a model that the authority could find, a case management model, which we did. So again, a big recommendation that was put in place, you see. And so we start looking at the strategic plan. Now, when I recognize that the law was not in tandem with practice.
Just take a note of the point that you stopped off for. You know, when I hear people start talking about strategic plan and vision and mission and so on, no, not trying to rubbish it. What comes to my mind is bureaucrats. What comes to my mind is red tape. What comes to my mind is beautiful structuring, but they're doing a damn thing. The reason I'm trying to say that is that, correct me if I'm wrong, that in this particular circumstance, what would have been the purpose and the intent of that strategic plan, other than to tell me we have a strategic plan?
You see, that is other people, but with Hanif E.A. Benjamin, that is not the case. Because I think that I'm a practitioner, because I see and I understand from my many years of service throughout the world. And I understand a strategic plan is not just a fancy document in my book, but it's a document that is going to be broken down. Because when we did that, every department had their KPIs, and the board monitored KPIs to ensure...
KPI being key performance indexes.
Yes, to ensure that it was happening. And what was powerful about this strategic plan 2020-2023 is that a greater understanding of our legislative mandate, because I also believe a lot of what was happening at the authority was outside the scope of the law. And so we had to...
Say that again?
A lot of what was happening was outside the scope of the law.
Or you all were breaking the law?
Yes, and they continues to do that today. We have children, residents, and community residents that are not licensed. In essence, those places should be closed. But there is a crisis of placement, so what do you do? And even with that, which I will come to later, there were strategic things that we ought to have done, that we asked to be done, that was never done. And that is the oxymoron that we're dealing with. And so the strategic plan was done understanding that the legislative framework had to be redone. So we did a 45-page dive into every piece of child legislation, whether it is sexual offenses, a deep analysis. And that informed the strategic plan, because everything now had to go in line with the law. And what we recognized there, that the law was inadequate. So law and practice wasn't coming together. Now in 2018, we worked tirelessly with the then Attorney General to change about 18 pieces of legislation. That was a powerful exercise. And we were at Alga Building day and night to do it. But in doing that, we recognized that more needed to be done to strengthen child protection. And therefore, we submitted another 20-page document with legislative review and suggestions. And so when I hear the Judith Jones saying that a legislative review needs to be done, I'm asking myself, so why didn't the authority, why didn't the Office of the Prime Minister say, well, this is done because I emailed it to you. We have this. This was a lot of work done to change these laws to strengthen them. So where is it?
Okay.
Why is it?
We'll continue that discussion, but we have to pause, and we'll continue our discussion with the former chairman of the Children's Authority, Hanif Benjamin, and get further into these issues. And again, with all of this reaction as if this is something new and brand new, why didn't all that information, all that work bear any fruit so that we wouldn't be, again, pretending that this is something new? But let's remind you of the COVID-19 protocols as we take a break. Wear a mask over the nose and mouth when you go out in public. Keep your distance from others, 6 feet or 2 meters. Stay home if you're ill. Wash your hands often with soap and water, or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Cough into a tissue onto the crook of your elbow. Avoid touching your face. Sanitize those hard surfaces, tabletops, handrails, doorknobs, trolleys and cell phones as often as possible. We'll return to our dialogue with Hanif Benjamin right after this. 6:38 in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's return to our dialogue with former chairman of the Children's Health Authority, Hanif Benjamin. Mr. Benjamin, I know you have lots of different bits of information that you would like to present to us. So let's continue, because I think it's important to understand, because again, questions are being asked of the Children's Authority, and you were talking about the issue of a strategic plan and putting things in place. So just continue to enlighten us.
Right, and so when you spoke about the strategic plan being a nice document and what did you do, and I said not with me, because we broke it down and we began to work on it, and one would have been the suggestions in terms of redoing the law to match practice, to strengthen what we do, you see. And so that was done. That exercise was complete, and it was in the hands of the ministry, right? Where did that go?
Ministry as in
the
Ministry
Office of the Prime Minister.
Office of the Prime Minister, right?
Right, where did that go and what yield from it? I do not know. We demitted office, but that was completed and sent as an action item out of the strategic plan. So you see, the strategic plan wasn't just a nice document.
Okay.
The other major thing is the restructuring of the organization. You remember I said when it was created, the vision and foresight wasn't a social service. Fazir, I have never met a group of people, although the board sometimes, and I used to have some fights, and we had our moments. But these people work hard, Fazir. They work, as a matter of fact, some of them were working harder than their full-time job. I had a wonderful group of people who kept me on my toes, and by God, I kept them on their toes. And we began restructuring the organization. I created a committee. And we were at the final stages up until when we left there. We were working with PMCD, which is the Public Management Consultancy Division. And the Jacqueline Johnson, which was the PS at the time. That woman is a powerful woman who understands child development, who understands children. And we were working hand in hand, restructuring the organization. And we were going back and forth. And so when we left office, that document, that mammoth task, which hours was put into, was at its final stage. But it is my understanding that as soon as we demitted office, a different direction began. And 2 years hence, where are we? So again, when I hear in the report that we need to restructure the organization, in my mind I'm saying, but after 2 years of all these hours that this board put in with management, because we had a dedicated team, hours into the night, hours, we're talking about all their meetings, going through documents, what does it mean, research, analysis, because restructuring is not an easy task.
Could I ask a question? And I know you have a lot of information in the very little time that we have left with it, but if you all were doing such good work, why did you all, were you all replaced? Was it by choice? Did you opt to leave?
You had to call the minister and ask her that. Because
Minister Ayanna Webster-Roy?
Ask Minister that because...
Were you willing to stay on?
I am willing to serve. I've always been willing to serve. And every board member was asked the question by the permanent secretary, are you willing to serve? That is something that they always ask. And outside of 3 persons from the 12 or 13 member, everybody else was willing to serve. So I don't know what happened, when it happened, and how it happened, but another board was put in place.
Okay, right. I just wanted to establish that. I don't want it to be said that you all refused the option.
Oh, no.
Okay, all right, so
As
continue.
a matter of fact, if I could say, 2 members of that board, I had to keep talking to them for a while after we demitted office, because they became very dejected in the feeling that they did so much and they wasn't able to stay on to carry it through. And that hurt because I had to help them through that difficulty.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
And so we were, at the end or tail end of a full restructuring of that organization. So where is that and what happened is my question. Why didn't Judith Jones report say that they saw this? Why didn't they say that they saw the legislative reviews? Why, the report should said they saw legislative review. However, the report's supposed to say we saw a restructuring. However, because these things were done.
Maybe nobody tell them?
Well, this is what I'm saying. So when the press is calling me from since Sunday night, I've had over, 60 calls, 40 requests for TV. I mean, so much. Asking me, well, what did you do? I am perplexed because all of these things are well documented here. And everything I'm saying here, Fazir, is unimpeachable.
But I was going to ask you,
because it's here.
Are we going to get someone on the show come in tomorrow to say, Hanif Benjamin is a liar?
But I want them to come here and tell me that. And if I lied or if I misrepresent, I will come here and apologize. But everything I'm saying here is right here, all my emails here. Everything here, all the documents here, look at here.
Continue with the point.
And so let me run through quickly because I don't want to stick. The reception center, that was a big part of the report. Again, they talk about hiring an internal security system and developing a... Fazir, that was started. Fazir, I recognize that that was a major failing of the authority. And I asked the then deputy director to create a report on the feasibility, much like what WASA and TNTEC has their own internal security apparatus. That was passed by the board and instituted. And when I left, I think there were already 3 internal security officers. So why and how did that fall? So when I hear a report telling me that this is a recommendation, I am now confused because I saw and we acted. So where is it? Again, that reception center was so much problems. I had to go and see for myself because, I don't want to just sit down on the red chair and have people tell me, because a lot of the information that was coming through here was so sanitized. It was so sanitized. And what was crazy is I would have received from people the unsanitized version under my door, and I'm in a boardroom listening to people telling me the most rosiest of pictures.
Well, why would they do that? Why? Is it have a vested interest to keep things? Do they have a financial stake in certain institutions?
There was a caterer who came in there at the beginning of the children, that place, Fazir. No tendering, nothing. 5, 6 years. 7, 8, how much years? When I asked to see the contract, what contract? When I asked to see the procurement, what procurement? This is madness in the state agency. Madness. And this is the things that this board had to deal with. The sanitization of information. So now, when you ask to get a report that's supposed to be 1 page, you're getting a 40-page document with 300 attachments. You're trying to confuse people. But you see, I had some eagle eyes on the board. right? The wheelers and the dicks and the discard. And they would read. We read. We read everything. And so nothing was passing. So we were just coming and we were just asking the questions to get the answers that we needed. And we had to shake the tree so many times to actually get the fruit. Why that is the proverbial question, you know. And so that place continued. When I left the authority, one of the major angst was the education plan for these children. Because the board revealed, and I always hear Dr. Freddie James, who was the education person on the board, always beat it, where is the education plan? What are we doing for education? So again, I was shocked to learn, because they were already in train to hire a special education person and come up with a trauma-informed education. So again, where was that? And in that place, I tell you, I had to visit. And when I visited, I asked them to do a full audit of that place. I said, because if we can't pass a license for our place, how in the name of everything that is holy, we could license other people? I was totally dissatisfied with L&M, and I'm saying it here, licensing and monitoring. Because I believe that that department is the lifeblood of the organization. You have to monitor and you have to license. And if we're not doing the two, then children will die.
And this is the issue, and I mean, we may not have time to go through all the points that you want to raise, but I hope you're still able to highlight quite a few of them. The question has to be asked, Hanif Benjamin. Did you believe that the majority of people you worked with and you interacted with at the Children's Authority appreciated the immediacy of the issues that you... Because as you said, when you fall down on the job, children die or are abused.
But we saw that. We saw that.
Are you satisfied that the people there were aware of that and were prepared to act based on that?
I think there was a general understanding that this is my job. But you see, working with children in the social sector, this is not a job. This is not a job.
It's a vocation.
This is a vocation, and firstly, let me tell you something. I made a point with some article, I think with Sheila. I said, no matter what you do, you will never have sufficient resource. I work in the United States system. It is not the Bella Roses, but it worked because we understood that scarce resources is something that we have to live with. You have to be innovative. And I don't feel as if people were willing to be innovative, because I find that most of the suggestions came from the board members to the executive as opposed to the executive to the board. So we always had to tell them in the most instances, we would like that, and then you have to now go and do that. That shouldn't be. We should be seeing innovation. You telling me that the reason why we're operating in silos is because we don't have a management system. What happened to the spreadsheet? What happened to Google Drive?
Was there a preoccupation? As again, mercifully, I've never really worked in a government agency, and I hope never to.
Jesus.
I'd rather go and work, sit on by the pavement with my hands so rather than work for government. But was there preoccupation with bureaucracy? As to whether with that innovation, was that attempt at innovation stymied by bureaucracy?
Innovation comes with knowledge, and knowledge comes with your vocation, you see. And I'm saying that to answer your question, because if the people who are in charge are not educationally in line, skill set in line, then you will always have bureaucracy. Because if you are a social worker, if you're a clinician, if you know what you're about, then all of these recommendations that came through me as the chairman from the board, we wouldn't be in this problem. And so for me, the greatest problem is who leads your system. Right now, there's a situation in the authority where everybody on the upper management is acting by one. That has been so for almost 2 years. 2 years. The director has left since God knows how long. We have an acting director. I love the woman to death. Powerful woman. Acting. The deputy director of corporate acting for almost 2+ years. I think there's somebody new there now acting. If we don't get, and that was one of my major concerns. And I went to the ministry and I said, the executive is weak. The executive is weak and the executive needs support. And so it was important. Why do we have an agency with so many actors? Team leads acting here, managers acting there. Again, the innovation would come if you understand what you're doing. The innovation will come if you understand child protection. The innovation will come if your heart different and you don't see this as a work. No, I'm not saying the authority has great people. Great people working tirelessly. However, are we working tirelessly because we don't have the skill set, we don't have the resource, or we don't have the will? And so when you look at all of these recommendations, 95% of which I would have made, which should have already been in place, which we left for zero, you have to ask the question whether there is a will to really understand child protection in the realness. 126 million. I am happy that this task force is going to get that. I wish I had that.
Why are you happy? There's another 126 million wasted.
But seriously, you're hearing my voice. You're hearing my voice. Because I'm saying, I wish I had that. Because if we had that for you, with the recommendations that we would have been in train with, that authority would have been a different place today. You see, for you, why we have to prioritize now, when we have had reports since 1962 coming up the road? Why do we have to prioritize? Because if you don't put children first, if you do not see children as the priority, this was always be, and let me tell you something, long before I came into the Children Authority, go back since King Hatchet was a hammer, and Google Hanif E.A. Benjamin, and you will hear my mantra has been the same. I have not wavered in my understanding or in my pursuit to ensure that children are secured in this country. Since I came back to this country in 2012, and I was doing it outside before that. Because I genuinely believe that if we do not invest in our children today, we will pay as the Ministry of National Security. We will pay. We will pay.
Well, we are paying.
And that is my point. And so I have always said, let us invest in our children first. It means putting the resources. Now, I must admit the ministry, OPM, every time I ask for money, they try to facilitate. When I ask for $1 million, I'll get probably 100,000. But they tried. And that is why, for you, I recognize in law, legislation, there was a criteria that said we could raise our own funds. And immediately, I created a committee to raise funds. I would have asked for 2 buses. I think they got those 2 buses. I ensured that we needed to get a bigger place for rehabilitative purposes. These little houses, not working. I engaged with then Minister of National Security, Stuart Young. And we were in talks to use like old Petrotrin bungalows or Caroni bungalows to create a system around that. So the government was working with me, so that is why I am surprised when I hear all of these things.
So therefore, I mean, you use the question, is there a will? And therefore, I have to ask the question, Hanif Benjamin. I mean, we have just a couple of minutes left in our discussion. But where does the ultimate responsibility for that blockage lie? If we're talking about cardiac arrest in the Children's Authority, where did that blood clot originate? Is it at political level? Is it at PermSec level? Is it at just, the whole laissez-faire public servant level? Is it that where did that absence of will to get the job done?
Let me tell you, in my humble opinion, as I mentioned, everybody, and I'll be fair to the minister, because I think that she did and was trying to do as best as she can under the circumstances. I have to be fair to the PermSec. This woman worked hard. There wasn't a day that the PermSec and I wasn't on that phone, Sunday to Sunday, discussing and pushing forward. I believe that the issue here is an understanding one of child protection. I think the issue here is good people working in silos. I think the issue here is an understanding as to how do you protect. And the greatest issue for you is an understanding that child rights is as important as you and I. We push children to the back. The only time we pay attention to children is when they're in trouble. Your child home playing right now, the only time you go in and think is when they start to cry. And that is it. We don't pay attention to our children. And so all of this issue is people really understanding that children are the priority. And getting people to do the job with that understanding. The greatest challenge was helping the authority to recognize what is your risk. What are your risks? If you don't understand your risk, then how can you mitigate those risks? And if you don't understand how to mitigate your risk, how are we going to save children? So getting the right people to do the right job is important. People need to put aside stupid ego, political assuasion, and you can't say this because this one was vexed. I don't have time. Because I have often mentioned, if the conversation is not about children, don't call me. Don't call me. I don't want bacchanal. Don't call me. I want to know, how can we help our children? And one of the greatest challenges, you started by saying it is a fear. You said people scared. We are in a country where you're right. People feel as if they will be politically victimized. Real people tell me, don't come here this morning of this year. Oh God, because people still believe that you're getting big contract from the state and you're getting this and you're getting that. People know that I work until 2, 3 in the morning to move my business along. People think that when you was the chairman of the board, you get $1 million and driving a nice car. But they know it's a stipend you're getting. And you're working 60 hours when you're supposed to be coming to one board meeting a month.
And that you probably fix your business so that all this will come to you now in private practice.
Yeah. Oh God, for you should see the social media. They're brutal there now. People tell me don't come now because how you go talk this and how it go look and how. I said I think that I am fair and I am balanced in my thoughts and in my action. When we did good, I said congratulations. But if you're prepared for me to tell you congratulations, you must also be prepared for me to tell you you need to do better. People don't like to hear that part.
Hanif Benjamin, time has run out on us, unfortunately, this morning. But I'm sure there's a lot more coming from your own perspective as chairman of the Children's Authority. We want to thank you and keep those notes handy because I suspect that we'll be returning to our discussion. And indeed, keep it handy for all the other journalists and media people who will be trying to get your further perspectives on this issue as we once again pretend that this is something new and, just keep things stirring along for a little while longer. Thanks very much once again.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're more than welcome. Hanif Benjamin, former chairman of the Children's Authority. The news coming up at the top of the hour.